Okay. So we are now holding in the Talmud on 51b5 for those of you who have the book. And I guess let's start, right? Tanu Rabbanan. We learned in a brisa, Dvorim shebein Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Beseuda. There's a brisa that said that there's a dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel with regards to meals. Beis Shammai Omrim says Beis Shammai Mevorech al hayoim, you recite the blessing on the sanctity of the day. Va'achar kach Mevorech al hayayin. First, you make a blessing on the Shabbat, and then you make the Berei Pri Hagafen on the wine. Shayoim goyreim liyayin sheyavoi. The day, why? He says because the day causes the wine to come before the meal. If you didn't have the day, you wouldn't have the wine. Ukvar kadesh hayoim ve'dayin yayin loiva. And because the day has already been sanctified and the wine has not yet come to the table, then you do the day before the wine. The Beis Hillel says, shocked, the exact opposite. You first make the blessing on the wine, then you make the blessing on the day itself. Because the wine causes the blessing of sanctification to be said. Davar achar. Another point, the blessing over the wine is very frequent. The blessing over the sanctity of the day is not frequent. And we have a rule. What is the rule? Tadir she'enai tadir tadir kodem. Anything that's more frequent takes precedence. And in this situation, we go according to Beis Hillel. We're not surprised because we usually go according to Beis Hillel. So essentially, the debate over the wine is whether the day is more important or the wine is more important. Now, the truth is that the only reason why we're using the wine is because we want to show how special this day is to us. How do we do that? By using the most valuable beverage that we have, wine. And so we show God that your mitzvah is very important to us through this particular beverage. And so Beis Shammai has a good point, and Beis Hillel has a good point. But the halacha is tadir she'ena tadir tadir kodim, whatever is more frequent is going to take precedence. That is in everything. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a Shabbat and a Chag and a holiday, a particular holiday. This year, for example, Rosh Hashanah is going to be on Friday night, the first night of Rosh Hashanah. So, what is more important? It's a very, very important question. You would say, what's the most important day in the Jewish calendar? Rosh Hashanah. So, if you have a difference between the Shabbat and the holiday, which one do you sanctify first? So we now learn something very important, and it's going to be a klal gadol, that's called. It's going to be a general rule with regards to everything, and that is that if it's more frequent, it's more important. So because the Shabbat happens every single week, and Rosh Hashanah only happens once a year, the Shabbat is more important.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Maurice and I did that. That one made sense to both of us. In our conversation about this particular part, we did a separate question came up, and that is that for Shabbat, if there are no candles, what does that mean exactly for welcoming in the Shabbat and creating the holy space?
What do you mean if there are no candles?
Meaning, so the conversation started like we were talking about if there's no wine, what you can do instead of wine, you can do tea, etc. And then we were just musing about candles, lighting candles. What if you have no candles to light on Shabbat? It's a side street.
There's no candles. There's no lights.
So what does that mean for the act? Well, okay, that just blew my mind. So what you're saying
Rabbi,
is,
so like let's say we're in the forest, we've gone camping and we didn't bring candles and Shabbat, but Shabbat arrives whether or
What do you
not
mean?
we
If you're in
have
the
candles.
forest, if you're in the forest, you take
Light a
two.
tree?
You light a stick. You light a stick, and you take two Flintstones, and yeah. Come on, this is Boy Scouts 101.
yeah,
No, but seriously, it can happen that you don't have candles.
You don't need a candle. You need a light.
So you could turn on a light in the house and make that your Shabbat
No,
light.
you can take a stick and put it in the ground and put a fire on it.
Okay.
okay, well, so wait, I hear what you're saying. And so just to clarify, what I am hearing is that it is so important to have that light. And we can't use the metaphor of our divine spark. It needs to be a physical light that if we do not do that, we are we aren't performing the mitzvot properly.
The world needs your light on Friday afternoon. Even if there's many other people that the world got their light, the world didn't get your light yet.
Okay. Okay. So I am hearing the utmost importance of be in a situation where you always have candles.
When I was a student, a rabbinical student, so being in the Chabad rabbinical schools, you often would get sent as a student to some remote place in the world. And so I had the table that I sat on was so generally when you're in rabbinical school, most of your studies are done by study partners, right? Kind of, you understand the value of that. There's not, the frontal learning is not as done, but so you end up sitting at a table majority of your days with your study partner and you spend a lot of time studying. And so that particular school, the tables were in fours. So there were two study partners that would sit together. So we also, you're still studying only with your partner, but because they're sitting at your table, you end up, they end up getting involved sometimes in your discussion and your debates. And so there was one, so not my study partner, but the study partner that was next to me, he was sent to a remote island that is west of Alaska. It's like somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, the upper Pacific Ocean, like somewhere, I don't know, it's like somewhere between Alaska and Russia. Like it's just
That's out there. That's harsh conditions out there.
It's very, very harsh conditions. It was a remote island, and he was there. It was this time, it was like September. He was there in September, October. Anyway, they were purposely there to see if there were any Jews that lived on this island. And they went scouting and started asking around, and they could not find anyone. They were there for a week. The two study partners that were next to me, two of them went together, and they were there for a week. They could not find anyone. They had really done a very thorough job. It wasn't a huge island, and there wasn't a lot of people there, but they could not find one Jew. They were like wondering why are we even here? Like if there's if we came to visit the Jewish community, there's not one Jew here. The day before they were supposed to leave, they ended up deciding. Oh, they had made a appointment with the local elementary school because they were very excited. Two rabbis, the kids had never experienced a rabbi. They had a whole like spiritual program, and they wanted to introduce the rabbis to the kids in the school. So they made an assembly with all the kids in the school, and the day was going to be the day before they left. And so they figured that they might as well ask the question to the kids when they're talking to the kids. Is anyone here Jewish? So one girl raises her hand and says, I'm not Jewish, but my mother is, in the assembly. And now my friend came back and he was saying, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm never going to be here. Who knows if there's ever going to be a rabbi or any kind of Jewish presence on this island ever again. This is in 1998, so it's before the internet wasn't really a thing at the time. Who knows if anyone's ever going to be here? What do I say to this girl who I have one interaction with, and this may be the only Jewish interaction that she ever has? And so he turned to this young woman, 10 years old, and he said, on Friday afternoon, there's a very, very special gift that is given only to women. On the onset, right before sundown, women all over the world who are of Jewish descent light the Shabbat candles and bring light into the world. And then he said that he said, you all know, because you're not far from here, but there's the international dateline. It's not far from here. So the first Jewish community in the international dateline taking Shabbat is New Zealand. So the people of New Zealand taking Shabbat, and then he continues saying, and then the people of Australia taking Shabbat, and then the people in Far Asia taking Shabbat, in Japan and in China, and the Jews of Singapore and Thailand, and then the Jews of Russia and the Jews of India, and then the Jews in the Middle East and Israel, and then in Europe and Africa and South Africa, and then it moves towards England, and then to Iceland, and then it moves towards the Jewish community maybe in the Maritimes, and then the Jewish community in Canada and the US, and in different time zones, and the Eastern, and in the Central, and then the Mountain, and then in the Pacific time zone. And there's one time zone in the entire world where there's no one to light the Shabbat candles. And that's this time zone right here. And he turns to this young woman and says, the entire world waits for you to light the candles every week to complete the light in the world.
That's incredible. And where is this woman today? Do we know what became of this amazing interaction?
We do know, but that doesn't matter. But it's not what happened afterwards. It's the power of, I brought up this story because of the power of the lighting of the candles.
I follow. Okay, noted. Importance noted.
Okay.
Okay, no matter what, even if we have to hit two rocks together, we'll get a spark. Okay, you got it, Rabbi.
Hit two rocks, get a spark, and make a blessing, because the world needs your light. And
Maurice,
right.
let's not light let's not do the tree. Let's not light a tree though.
okay, yeah, and no Canadian forest fires. Bad idea.
Bad idea. All right, thank you, Rabbi. Thanks for answering that question. Thank you.
Okay. Now the Gemara is going to ask a question. My davar acher. What was the point? Why did Beis Hillel have to mention this idea of Tadir She'ena Tadir Tadir Kodem, that if it's more frequent, it's more important? Why does Beis Hillel have to mention that? The Gemara says, V'chi Tema. What is Beis Hillel saying? He's saying, if you will say that the first reason alone does not suffice, what's the first reason? That you should recite the blessing on the wine and then afterwards the blessing on the day. But maybe Beis Hillel is saying it's not enough of a proof that Beis Shammai is wrong. He wants to win the argument. Awesome, he says, Tar Deva Hochachada, because there, in support of Beis Shammai's ruling, there are two reasons, but here in support, there's only one reason. So Beis Shammai is winning the argument. But here, There's also two reasons why. Because I brought, Beis Hillel brought the davar achar, the other point, saying that more frequent is more important. Birchas hayayin tadira, the blesser over the wine is more frequent. Birchas hayayin meina tadira, and the blessing over the day is not as frequent. Tadar v'sheina tadar kodim, and that's the rule. Whatever is more frequent, if it conflicts, like this year's Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat, if it conflicts, they're both very important, but Shabbat is more frequent. So whatever conflicts takes precedence. If it's more important, if it's more often, it takes precedence.
I'm glad you addressed that because I saw that on the calendar and my mind immediately got so confused about how to handle that. So
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah, no, but these are real problems. And of course, the Talmud is going to discuss this. So, and it's probably one of the most famous rulings in all of Jewish law because it always works. There's no exception to that law. It's more frequent, it's more important.
So for instance, when we're doing the blessings for Shabbat, we would do the blessings for Shabbat first and Rosh Hashanah second, or we would do Rosh Hashanah first
The blessing for
and
Shabbat
second.
first. We're going to do Yom HaShishi. We'll do Shabbat first, and then we're going to do the Rosh Hashanah. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and then Saturday night is even harder because Saturday night there's a mnemonic for what we're going to do the second night of Rosh Hashanah this year. It's called Yak Nahaz. It's a mnemonic. Yayin Kiddush Ner Havdalah Zman.
So that's the order of prayer.
Order of the prayer. It's called Yak Nahaz. Yeah.
I'm gonna.
So we discussed this at length because of the tractate that we were working on, or the page we were working on, and I couldn't quite grasp why was this continuous argument about wine, because like even if you only have 1 cup of wine in the house, it's all you've got. Let's say that there was a time when people didn't have bottles and bottles and bottles just sitting there for waiting to be used, right? Maybe people only bought small amounts or something, okay? But you can do Havdalah on other substances. You don't have to have wine.
Correct.
So why are they arguing about the glass of wine? You've got to do blessings.
They're going to come to that conclusion. That's how the conclusion happens. You are living in a world of hindsight. Okay, gotcha.
So
this is how it all happens. What happens if you don't have wine? That's number one. And number two, you wouldn't argue about wine?
Well, I mean, I would argue about wine anytime. I mean, wine is one of the most important meals of the day. But...
Exactly. Exactly. So, and what do you think? They didn't think the same thing. They were all wine aficionados over there.
I don't know. They had to add water to their wine, so not sure about that. Must have been some thick pus that they were drinking that they had to add water to it.
Let's just say they didn't have granulated sugar or Manischewitz.
Manischewitz, please, Rabbi. Although my mother loved Manischewitz, to be true, my mother loved that stuff.
Of course, who doesn't love it? 62% sugar. There's more sugar in Manischewitz than grape.
I did that as a joke because my grandma was born her mother was born in Paris, and they had wine was important to them, and so I always thought they had the Manischewitz there as a joke. I was pretty young, but I do remember being like, why is that at the table? I don't understand.
I happen to enjoy wine, and there's not a bottle of Manischewitz in my house. I'll tell you that much.
No, I'm sorry. I won't drink Manischewitz. I'll look at it, but I won't buy it, and I won't drink it.
I mean, if you want, we can put it on the table for old time's sake, but we're not opening it.
Oh yeah. We could just.
Though I will say, if you ever find the cherry Manischewitz, it makes a fantastic Slurpee.
Is that? Love it.
Mix it with ice.
No, what you do is because because it has alcohol in it, you put it in the freezer and it won't fully freeze.
Mm.
Then it becomes slushy.
That
The
sounds
black-
horrible.
We can Manischewitz slushy. Oh, I
The-
don't know
the-
about that.
The blackberry and grape Manischewitz does not do as good of a job as the cherry, though it does feel a little bit like you're having a Slurpee cough syrup. So,
By the way, my son discovered those popsicles with alcohol in it. You know, the ones that, yeah, they disappeared.
Thing. I've been out of the game for so long. So they make
alcoholic popsicles now.
Wow.
Yeah, when I first put it in the freezer, my son was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, this is like wine and alcohol in, like popsicles." And he was like, "Oh yeah, right, Mom." And the next thing I know, boom, I pick up the little popsicle plastics here and there. I'm like, oh, I see. I guess desperate times. When I was away, they got through everything. And I mean everything. I came back one night, I was looking for the vodka to get a glass, and there was nothing. No vodka, no gin, no anything in my house, like nothing except wine. They didn't touch the wine. So I drank the wine, but they drank everything. I said to him, "You must have had a good party." No, actually, I took them shopping, him and his buddy, and I came out with a bunch of stuff, like cases and cases of stuff. And I said, "I'm not pointing any fingers, but I think somebody had a party." And they both kind of went, yeah. So I don't even want to know what went down in my house when I was away.
But
If they were able to drink everything.
did they clean up? That's the important part. Did they clean up properly?
They cleaned up, yes, because there was no evidence of the party.
Good.
But the house was still pretty, it was a rough ride. It was definitely, I picked up the girl who helps me at the house. I picked her up from my way to the airport home. It was a damn good thing because there was a lot. There was a lot to do. Let's put it this way. She and I both worked and we were both pooped afterwards. Definitely. So Noah told me he cleaned the day before. He spent the whole day cleaning. I don't know what that means. But I'm really glad he did, because I can't even begin to imagine what it would have been like otherwise. So, lesson to myself, the next time I lock up all the good stuff and I leave out only the junk I want them to drink, because clearly they are kids. They don't know any better.
Yeah.
I think you should lock up everything else and leave out the 96% moonshine. That will teach him a lesson.
I feel like we were, Maurice, weren't we just, was it a study session? I can't believe it's come up again, but we were talking about Everclear. I just remember we had a moment.
Everclear is the best way to teach young people not to drink.
Oh yeah. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I've never had it. I've heard of it, but
though I will tell you, this is terrible. There was a big problem with alcohol in the Chabad, the Hasidic world, years and years ago. So the Rebbe instituted a decree that if you're under 40, you can only have 4 l'chaims, 4 ounces at a Farbrengen.
Mm-hmm.
And if for us growing up, it was very important. You can only have 4. But then we discovered Everclear, which is double trouble.
You only get 4.
You get 4 l'chaims, but nobody said. But the Rebbe never said the amount of alcohol in the l'chaim.
See, this could be a piece in the Talmud.
I know.
It could.
This is what happens when you make a decree for Talmudic students. You're going to find
absolutely. He should have gone. He should have become. He should have known that Talmudic students would find a workaround.
So as young adults, we all learned how to drink Everclear because it was double trouble.
Oh my gosh! And that's so hard on the liver. Oh my gosh!
We used to do it straight up. We used to drink it straight up.
That I can't even imagine that Fibringen must have been like.
Yeah.
And never clear is like what, 80, 90 proof?
96.
Oh my God,
No,
that
it's
must
not
have burned
96.
like,
It's not 96 proof. It's 96% alcohol.
oh my gosh,
The worst.
that must have burned going down.
Yeah,
I think
people
right-
use it to make moonshine.
No kidding. And I'm sure that that's what they used to use for medicinal purposes back
For
in
sure.
the day.
For sure, but
They used to
but- but-
disinfect wounds with
if
it.
you want to, if you want to disinfect your body, it's the best way to do it.
No kidding.
I-
But not the inside.
cleanser. I'm not sure. Well, I guess it could be.
What do you mean? It's a full cleanser.
That's kind of like a.
In the old days, they used to say that alcohol kills brain cells. So then we used to say, yeah, it kills the bad ones.
Oh, but Everclear will clean out everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, we have now officially gone to the level of real Talmudic study, because what ends up happening when you're studying Talmud and studying any Torah is you have spirits of folly that enter because they don't want you to study. And we call it, I mean, we used to call it a bullshove, but the bullshove starts happening. And then you start talking about this, and then you turn around an hour later and you're like, oh, we were supposed to be studying.
Okay, well, we have more questions, so let's get to it, because I'm excited for our next question.
Okay, good.
Could I just double check? Isn't Baal Shuv master of return? So that sounds more like Baal Teshuva than a folly. It sounds like returning.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. So we, so the Brisa continues. The halacha Beis Hillel. The halacha is according to Beis Hillel. Pshita. The Gemara doesn't want redundant words. We don't like redundant. If it's in the Talmud, this is very valuable real estate. Do you know what it was like 2,000 years ago to have a word on a page? Every word. There's no printing. Every single word in this Talmud was handwritten, and every volume of every Talmud had to be handwritten. This is even before this was made before the Codex, just to give you an idea. So the Gemara will ask a question about why are you putting a redundant word here? It's obvious that the halacha is Beis Hillel. We know the halacha is like Beis Hillel. We always know. The same way we have general rulings. Why are you asking this question? The ha nafka basko, for a heavenly voice is emanated and declared that the halacha always follows Beis Hillel. So just to go to note number 35, the Gemara in Eruvin relates that after 3 years of dispute between Beis Shalom and Beis Hillel, and whose halacha and who follows who, there was a heavenly voice which declared the halacha should be according to Beis Hillel. So why then does the Brisa need to teach that the halacha is according to Beis Hillel? If you want to say koydem basko, maybe the Gemara is talking before the heavenly voice came out and said that it's according to Beis Hillel, or maybe you can say that it was taught after the heavenly voice, just to make sure that we know. Look, it's got to be written somewhere. Rabbi Yeshua, he the Amar, but this is in accordance to the view of Rabbi Yeshua, who says, Ein mashkichim bevasko, we don't listen to the heavenly voice. So therefore, we have to say it in the Gemara, because we don't listen to heavy voices. Okay.
Okay, question. I have a question.
Yes.
Right
please.
after that. Okay. Well, we do listen to heavenly voices, because if Moses had not listened.
I know. So I know that you're gonna yes.
All right. Yeah, please explain,
Okay.
please.
So there's an idea of a bas kol. What is a bas kol? A bas kol is a heavenly voice emanates. We see these stories. It happens. It's very common. It's a very common colloquial term in the times of the Talmud. The story of Rabbi Shimon and his son, Rabbi Elazar, they're in a cave, they're hiding from the Romans, and a bas kol comes and emanates and says, the Roman Caesar has died, and you can now come out of the cave. It's a colloquial term that's used. I'm not sure. I know some people will debate me on this, that it's an actual literal voice. And I know there's stories of the literal voice, but I think it's important in our context to use it as a term. So it's not the same, we're not talking about the same idea as Moses speaking to God or as Abraham speaking to God. We're talking about a heavenly voice. There were certain times where there needed to be heavenly connection of some sort.
So something Maurice had brought up that I thought that resonated, that made sense to me is this idea, when you have a tzaddik, for instance, the Rebbe had I'm paraphrasing what she said, had a consciousness that was so, plugged in to the divine that maybe it wasn't an actual voice in the ear, but it was just, he could feel it. He just knew it. And that kind of idea made sense to me. So it doesn't necessarily have to be taken literally.
I think it needs to be honored, but not taken literally.
Rabbi, I was thinking of like someone like the Rebbe, who, if the Rebbe said to me that he heard the divine voice and the divine voice said ABC, I would tend to believe him. You tell me you heard a divine voice or your divine connection tells you ABC, I'd believe you. I wouldn't have trouble with it.
Yeah.
So you're not, you don't have a problem with it?
No, I mean, I don't. When we discussed it in that manner, to me, it made perfect sense. And then it turns around and it says, but we don't listen to it. We don't listen to it, but we do listen to it because, if you're hiding in a cave for 13 years and you hear a divine voice that says you can leave, I mean, clearly there are instances when we do listen to it.
No, we do listen to it and we don't listen to it. I think what the Talmud is trying to say here, and I'm stepping over my boundary here a bit. Yeah, I shouldn't say this, but what the Talmud I think is trying to say here is that, give me proof. The truth is, we don't need the heavenly voice because it's obvious to us. We've already discussed the last law. We knew why Beis Hillel was correct, and he gave good enough proof. He won the argument. So in this case, we don't need a heavenly voice. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. Well, it tables the nuances of those arguments because it's just saying, why waste our time talking about that? Because here we are, we already have the answer.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it was saying that we wouldn't take a heavenly voice over the decisions of the sages.
That's right. That's right.
And the heavenly voice, is it considered to be like how we feel inspiration, or is the heavenly voice like a voice that, like God spoke to Moses or something like that?
That's what I'm saying, is that after Moses and prophecy left this world, there's no God spoke to Moses anymore. I mean, God spoke to Abraham. That doesn't exist anymore. If somebody comes to me and says, I'm a reincarnation of Moses and God spoke to me, I would say, I'm very proud of you.
Because we know this will not happen until Mashiach. Is that why?
That's right.
Okay.
But that would be to say that Moses' soul wasn't completed if someone said that. So
That's correct. I'm saying, but if somebody came today, we live in a world of which prophecy doesn't exist, and God is not speaking to anyone on in the literal sense of the way that God spoke to Moses. We're just in the wrong time period. Sorry, if you want God to speak to you.
Oh, oh, so that's a way of answering, because otherwise it might seem that they're insulting Moses without realizing.
There's a very, very beautiful story of the fifth Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, Rebbe Shalom Dov Ber. When he was 7 years old, he came home from school crying. And his father asked him, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "I learned in school today that God revealed himself to Abraham. Why can't God reveal himself to me?" His father said, "If you were a person of 90 years old and you decided to give yourself a circumcision, then you deserve that God should reveal himself to you." That was his answer.
That's fair. I mean, that's a conversation ender right there. Like, okay. It's fair.
But he was genuinely sad, genuinely crying over the fact that God wouldn't. And we live in a time, and I think what this 7-year-old who later became a Rebbe, explained. I think within that we understand that there is that we live in a time period of which God will not reveal himself to us. So we don't have the Moses Abraham. We can only read it. We can only read it in the good book, the best-selling book of all time.
It's unusual because in Abraham's time there was no godliness as well. So does seem...
The way the Rebbe describes it is that different stages of the world, it's not only Rebbe, the Arizal says this as well, different stages of the world warranted different times. For example, Adam was like an infant, constantly needed God to take care of him, whereas Noah was more like a toddler. And Abraham is more like a child, and moving on. Moses is more like an adult, and here, in this time, we relate to God. Our relation to God is like an older child to whom's parents have passed on from this world. That's the way that we relate to God. So different parts of history related to God in different ways.
What do they say about the Messiah? How does that? What's the?
It's futuristic. It's not connected to this.
Oh, it's not like, because it almost sounds. I don't know if this. I hope this doesn't sound heretical, but it almost sounds like God's got to resurrect to come for the Messiah. So in other words, someone whose parent has resurrected to come for that period.
Oh, that's interesting that you're putting it. Yeah. So let's not take it literal. I don't want you to get that idea. Let's not take it literal.
Sorry about that. I couldn't resist.
Yeah. Well, we're about to open up this conversation about the Havdalah, and I'm thinking that we should wait because it's a separate conversation. Maybe we should wait till next week because I don't think we'll have enough time now to finish it, and I don't want to open it up and not end it. Do you have any questions about it before like, even though we'll talk more next week? I know you had some questions. Chava, Maria, are there any questions that came up in your class that you need to answer?
I feel like we addressed the topics that, let me just double check. I'm just going to look here, but I feel like we addressed the other thing. Yeah, in the Havdalah is our next question. So yeah, we'll just save it.
Okay, so we'll save it for next week. We'll do the Havdalah next week.
May I ask, if you don't mind, if you have maybe 5 minutes to spare, I have a question. I have a question about the. I didn't mean to turn off my camera. I have a question about praying. It's
Sure.
really technical because, is that okay with you?
Sure. I'm going to turn off the recording. We don't need to.